Hey everyone, welcome back to the Unfulfilled podcast. Today I'm so excited to be joined by Erika De Pellegrin, the host of the Balance Theory podcast. Erika, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for our chat.
So excited as well. So would love to turn it over to you to give a little bit of a brief background as to how you got started hosting the Balance Theory podcast and what makes you so passionate about it.
For sure. So it all started while I was kind of feeling very unfulfilled in my corporate job. So my background is I'm a lawyer and I've always been this kind of ambitious type of person. So really, it was always important for me to have a healthy fitness routine and then have a lot of friendships and make sure my family was prioritized and have an ambitious career. And so I always kind of felt guilty for not doing enough of everything. And I think a lot of people can resonate with this. You kind of feel overwhelmed trying to achieve some level of balance in your life. And so for me, it really started off at one point where I was feeling very unfulfilled with my corporate job. And I was like, this just isn't it for me long term. Like I need to find something else. And I was really stuck in that mindset of my job defines me. And it was only when I really started to think about that and think about how actually we can be multifaceted humans. Our job isn't the defining, it's just what we do. It's not who we are. I started to really turn my mind to what are the gaps in my job? Like, what am I missing? What am I looking for that this job isn't satisfying? And for me, it was deep and meaningful conversations, right? I'm that person at parties, at gatherings. Like I hate the surface level chit chat where you do kind of like speed dating conversations with everyone. That really, really drains me. What I really love and what I've always been drawn to and just end up doing all the time are these deep and meaningful conversations. But that introspection and that depth was really missing from my job. And so I thought long and hard about it, about how do I bring this into my life? And podcasting just seemed like a really natural segue to bring that in. And so it really started as a hobby out of something I felt I was really lacking. And at the time I was like, what do I even talk about? I don't want this podcast to be about law. It was more about what am I kind of curious and interested in? Mm-hmm. And so tapping into that pain point of feeling overwhelmed and constantly feeling like I couldn't achieve balance in my life. I really wanted to explore that as a concept. And I'm quite a curious person. So for me, it's been this amazing vehicle to connect and just learn from other people and as well just document my own curiosity along the way.
That's incredible. Thank you for sharing that. I noticed you used the word unfulfilled a couple times, and it made me realize just now how aligned we both are in starting the podcast, because that's 100% the exact same reason for the most part as to why I started my own. I work at a hedge fund in accounting, so like similar in the sense that like you lack
still
that fulfillment. Yes, still a corporate 9 to 5, still a job where it's like, okay, we don't really get that in-depth fulfillment from it. So that was a big reason I started mine as well. And I so agree. I think it's such a misconception in our society that we are defined by our job and that we can just do one thing on a day-to-day, and that ultimately is going to lead us to feeling unfulfilled in our day-to-day lives. And I think it takes really deeply connecting with new people, trying new things. So since your podcast is all about balance, first question I want to ask you is, what is your theory on balance?
So the balance theory was, I guess, my way of finding a sustainable approach to balance. And I guess it all started with me thinking about the concept of work-life balance and just feeling like it wasn't really a practical or concept everyone could tap into. So what I mean by that is I felt like it always made me feel guilty because it gives this feeling of like work is 50% and life is 50%. And on top of that, it's like work and life are separate, which is not always the case for everyone. And I just felt it was such a narrow blueprint that never really helped anyone achieve balance. So what I really wanted to create was something that everyone could take and apply to their own life in a very unique way. So I never want to be kind of talking about things in a way where it's like, this is the way to do it. Everyone has to do it this way, because I really appreciate that every one of us is so different in our interests, in our ambitions, in our responsibilities, in what we actually enjoy. And so I had to come up with something that was malleable enough to apply to different people at different moments in life. So where I kind of landed was, the balance theory is, think of having 3 gardens in your life: your health, your relationships, and then your fulfillment. and you'll love this because of the name of your own podcast, I moved away from calling that last category work, and I decided to call it fulfillment instead. Because
I love
again,
that.
I was like, I don't want to tie that to just work when really it encompasses our hobbies. If we volunteer, some people are full-time parents. That's something really fulfilling that they do. So I wanted to really open it up a little bit to not be so limited. So the idea is you've got these 3 garden beds. Now, the reason I called them gardens is because if we think of a garden bed, I'm not really a green thumb, but it needs some sun and some water in order to be sustained. Now, those things are your non-negotiables. They're the things that are just going to keep that garden kind of alive and well. They're the bare essentials, right? So I'll give you a really quick example. For your health, for me anyway, right now, it's drinking enough water every day, making sure I'm getting enough sleep, and moving my body every day. It's non-prescriptive, right? So I don't have to go to the gym every day. I don't have to do this exact thing, but I know how beneficial movement is for my body. And when you're thinking about these non-negotiables, the idea is not to go too crazy. I mean, I could get really carried away and put a 5-page list of things that are priorities for my health, but that's where we start getting really overwhelmed and we feel like we're not doing enough. So the idea is to just cap it at like 3, 4, 5 maximum of the things. And I like to think of it as if you didn't have those things in your life, it would impact your energy and the way you're able to show up in day-to-day life, right? So it's just the bare essentials. So once you do that for your health, your relationships, and then your fulfillment, we kind of start to get the idea of the garden beds because each garden have an element of seasonality. So you know how, for example, there's like summer fruits and winter fruits. What that means is there might be a period in your life where your fulfillment category, let's just say there's a project at work, is really ramping up and you need to dedicate more time to that area of life. What I found and what a lot of people often do is they completely neglect their health and their relationships for the sake of getting that project over the line. And that's where I found we started to venture into territories where we didn't feel balanced. And because we're not prioritizing those non-negotiables, we're not showing up the way we want to show up, right? Because we're just putting all that time in that one area. And so the idea here is if you have the non-negotiables, aka your sun and your water, front of mind and clear, and they're simple things that fit into your time every day, when those seasons come up, so busyness at work or something happens in your health, you need to go all in there. You're not completely neglecting the other areas. You're nurturing them all, but you're doing so in a way that allows you to kind of be flexible. And I think flexibility is the biggest skill you can have in anything because life is unpredictable and we can have a perfect plan, a perfect morning routine, a perfect idea of how day to day should look like. But life is unpredictable. And so what I found is this approach to balance has allowed me to be really flexible in allowing for different things that come up in life, but keeping those priorities at kind of top of mind. And there's this great saying, make the most important thing the most important thing. So that's kind of the intention with it.
I love that. I think my favorite part about it is that balance is going to look different at different phases in life, you know? And as you mentioned, there's no specific list of things that's going to provide us with that sense of total balance in life. It's not 50-50. It's just staying open and flexible to what do I need in this phase in life? How can I nurture my body, even if that's in the bare minimum? Like, what do I need, even just today? And I think even like on a day-to-day balance can look different. And I think having
100%.
that open-minded perspective to balance is such a beautiful thing. So thank you so much for sharing that theory with us.
You're
You
welcome.
talked a lot about being busy. I think a lot of us have that struggle when it comes with balance is we're so busy, whether it be we're working a corporate job or just cramming our weeks with social plans and just being productive every minute of the day. Why can being busy sometimes be a red flag?
So I definitely resonate with this. And I think a pain point a lot of people have is they don't have enough time, right? That's why they haven't been able to commit to a gym routine or they don't have enough time for what they love on the side, right? They don't have enough time, which is a byproduct of being quote unquote busy. But I think it's really important to distinguish between being busy by being busy and being busy because you're being productive. So what I mean by that is, and the analogy I like to use is think of a hamster on a hamster wheel. It's constantly moving, it's constantly doing something, but it's not really going anywhere. And I think sometimes when we're not clear on what our non-negotiables are, on what our priorities are, we can very easily be distracted doing a lot of things, but not really moving the needle in terms of what makes an impact in our life or what we feel fulfilled by. So I think if you find yourself always saying, I'm so busy, it's just a point of reflection for you to get curious and ask yourself, are you busy just doing stuff? Or are you busy with things that are actually fulfilling you? Because the flip of the coin is, if you're occupied doing things that mean something to you and that give you energy, which are what all your non-negotiables should be, then you won't be feeling drained all the time necessarily, right? Because you're
Mhm.
doing, like, I feel like there's energy takers and energy givers when it comes to tasks and
Yeah.
activities. And so if you're feeling really drained, it could be that you're just busy by being busy, but it's not impactful. And so I say that, being busy is a red flag, because I think if you're clear on your non-negotiables, and the kind of the layer I didn't go into in the balance theory is, when you got to structure your time, those are the things that go on your calendar first. You structure your time around those things, and anything else is a bonus and kind of at your discretion. So really, if you're doing anything that's not a non-negotiable, it's a moment to kind of check in with yourself and ask yourself, like, is this deserving of being in my time or on my calendar?
Yeah. Couple things came to mind as you were sharing those insights. I heard this I guess piece of advice when you're making a to-do list. Often we want to bury the most intimidating or hard thing deep within our list and kind of almost like procrastinate leading up to that big challenging thing. I think starting with the most important thing or the most intimidating thing on the list is really the best way to go about being productive in the day, because it's a big confidence boost if you literally start your day doing something that you would almost just get intimidated by or would seem like really challenging if you just put off. So I found that to be a good strategy, is whether it be your non-negotiable or whether it be that thing that you're just like a little bit intimidated by or nervous about. I think those need to move to the top of the list for sure. And then yeah, like push down the things that are not non-negotiables or are not necessary or are just going to add to the list of busyness and not necessarily provide to our fulfillment. And another thing that came to mind, a friend of mine, his name is Will, who I volunteer with, if we're just like chatting when we're volunteering together and sharing about our days, I'll say like, "Oh, this sounds like a busy day," or I had a busy day or something, and he pauses and he says, "No, no, not busy, productive." Like he reframes it and shifts the concept of busy to something that is actually a positive thing. It's just like shifting that concept of like, okay, they technically mean the same thing, but productive has a much lighter vibe to it and it's seen in a much more positive light, whereas busy can have this negative connotation. And so I just love that reframe and I wanted to share it because, okay, instead of saying just like our day is so busy and feeling negative about it, what if it's productive, and what if we focus on filling our day things that feel productive and fulfilling?
That's a really nice thing that your friends shares. And I think the key difference is, being busy or busyness focuses on quantity, but productivity focuses on quality, right? And
Yeah.
so it's about doing the high impact things. But I will say one thing on this, because obviously, like, in a corporate role, it's not the case that every task you do is going to be fulfilling, right? There's going to be
Mhm.
a big part of the day that's just admin or things that you have to do that you don't love with all of your heart, right?
Yeah.
That's, I think, when I'm talking more about like structuring your time, this is like how you organize your life. But when it comes to a job, we have to be, there are often things that you don't like doing, and maybe it does drain your energy. So one thing I'll add on this is shifting away from time management and looking at energy management. Is this something you've
Mm.
heard of?
Yes.
So yeah, basically, for anyone listening who hasn't heard of it, it's essentially where you look at yourself, right? Everyone knows themselves best. So for me, I was sharing with you just before, like, I'm a morning person. I have most of my energy in the first half of the day. Whereas my husband, he's a night owl. He will be up till 12, 1, 2 a.m. That's when he's doing his best work. It's just when he's got the most energy. So the idea of energy management is looking at when you have energy peaks and energy dips, and then actually coordinating your to-do list with that. So like you said, if there's a task that's like the biggest thing, it's very intimidating, you might want to do that when you have the most energy, because it's going to require the most from you, versus if you just push it out and end up having to do it when you have an energy dip, it's like you have to apply twice the amount of effort to something
Right.
that could have taken half the amount of time. So what I like to do, and I'm still working as a corporate lawyer, where I have things that are very admin based or monotonous, or I just, I don't really love doing them, I generally just do that when I have an energy dip. So it's not eating out of my kind of most productive time.
Absolutely. It's kind of like what came to mind for me is like if I have a decision I need to make or something that's stressing me out in life, I really try to avoid thinking about it and giving it headspace in the morning and in the evening, because first thing in the morning and like right before I go to bed, that's when my mental health is like not fully there yet, because those are my dips, you know? And so because I know those are my energy dips, I try to not overthink things during that time, because whatever comes to mind during that time, it does immediately lead to me overthinking and then like a
Mhm.
little bit more of anxiety and stress.
Yeah.
So I love that concept. And you mentioned this idea of conserving energy. That leads me to the concept of people pleasing. You spoke to the idea that you used to struggle with people pleasing, but you've learned to overcome them with practice. And as you've gotten older, could you share some of these maybe practices and mindset shifts surrounding people pleasing that you've learned?
100%. So I think the concept of people pleasing ties in really well with the idea of struggling to set a boundary. Because essentially, when I reflect on when I was like early 20s, generally what that looked like was saying yes to things I really wanted to say no to just because I didn't want to upset other people. Right. And this is really
100%.
common. Like so many people experience this. And for one thing or another, it could be the way you were raised by your parents or through school or through society or conditioning. You know, I think as women as well, we're told to just kind of be yes women and just like make everyone else happy and put everyone else first. And I think generosity is a beautiful gift you can give to others, but often it comes at the compromise of what you actually want. So
Mm.
there was one concept or mindset shift, as you said, that really changed all this for me. And it wasn't like I heard it and that was it. I became a professional at setting boundaries. It still took practice and it was still uncomfortable, but it was really the start of me rethinking about this completely. So the idea is when you say yes to somebody else for something you don't want to do, you're saying no to yourself. So saying yes to somebody else is saying no to yourself. So you're sitting there getting so stressed out and worked up and upset that you don't want to offend somebody else, but you're neglecting your own needs. And this was really powerful for me to just sit with for a long time. And you feel it in your gut, right? Like you feel
Mhm.
it when you don't want to do something and you say yes anyway. And you always regret the decision. You always wish you were at home just snuggled up on the
Always.
couch, or, you always know when you've gone against yourself. But really just having that at the beginning. So when I'm asked to go out and I don't want to go, just asking myself, like, who am I saying no to, myself or the other person? And
Mm.
it's about really bringing in the attention and making yourself a priority. And then I started thinking about this concept in reverse. I thought, what if somebody else was saying yes to something they didn't want to do just to make me happy? Like at the
Mhm.
end of the day, like, yes, I might be disappointed someone's not at an event, but I would never expect somebody to put what I want above what they want. Like, that's so crazy to think about. And so when I thought about myself doing that in reverse, I was like, this needs to change. So I hope this has kind of helped anyone that also struggles with people pleasing, because it really was the cornerstone of me shifting just how I was thinking about it. And then practicing setting the boundaries was kind of like a second piece to that. And it took time. Some things I still said yes to and no. But I think that also came with getting clear on my non-negotiables and what I need, and understanding, okay, what helps me show up every day? Those are things I'm not prepared to compromise on. So it kind of goes hand in hand, I guess, with being clear on your priorities, and then also understanding that you're the only person you need to say yes to first and foremost. And I say this, like, I don't have kids, but I think sometimes people feel bad for saying yes or no, if they have other people that rely on them. But at the end of the
Mm.
day, like, for you to be 100% for all those people that matter to you in life, like, you also need to be giving from a place of 100% energy. So whatever reframe you need to make it make sense for you, just know that, like, it's your responsibility to say yes to yourself, not anybody else.
I really love that reframe. I'm literally going to write that down, that when I say yes to someone else, it's saying no to myself. And I like that you highlighted too that it's not just like, okay, the second you hear that mindset shift, you're just like immediately like a professional people pleaser. You're like, that's not really how any of this works, right? It's just like it's constant practice, whether it be finding balance in life, whether it be overcoming people pleasing. The more we practice it and the more we learn along the way, the better we become at it, like anything, you know? And so I definitely have and do struggle with people pleasing as well. Like you said, I think most women really have this issue. We just want to be liked. We don't want to stir the pot. But I found that when I do say yes to something that deep down I don't really want to do, like whether it be going to the social outing like at night because I'm not a big night person,
I
I'll
hear
find
you.
myself there and I'm like, oh, like literally, why am I here? Like I could be in bed right now watching a movie. And every single time I do lean in and say yes and cave and have that feeling of regret, next time I'm put in that instance, I try to remind myself of the fact that I really didn't enjoy it last time I said yes to it, and I
Mhm.
recognize, you know what, this really isn't for me. It didn't serve me the last couple times I said yes to this. And then the more I practice saying no to things that don't serve me, the more comfortable it becomes. You recognize that when you do say no to a friend, let's say for a social outing or whatever it is, you just don't have the energy for, it doesn't mean that they're dropping you as a friend. It doesn't mean you're never going to see that person again. It doesn't mean that you're missing out on this experience and memory they're going to talk about for years without you. I think that's a big fear we have, is just the FOMO. We're like, oh, I have to say yes so I
100%.
don't miss out. But you're not missing out on anything. And I think almost friends would probably respect you. I would hope at least that you have the kind of friends that would respect us for valuing ourselves and knowing ourselves so much to give us what we actually need and having the confidence to communicate that. So,
100%. Have you heard
yeah.
of JOMO? It's the joy of missing out.
Do you know who introduced that to me? Is Paula.
Oh, there you go.
Yes,
So
but share that. I would love for you to share that.
yeah, it was basically saying, we do have FOMO. It's a very real thing of, you fear missing out, what you're saying no to. But there's also the joy of missing out because you know that you'd much rather be at home. The other
Yeah.
thing I'll just quickly add is I think we also tell ourselves we're a lot more important to other people than what we actually are. Like at the end of the day, if I've got a friend that really wants to go out and she's going out with a group and she really wants me there, at the end of the day, like she really wants to go. So if I'm there, it's a value add, but she's still going to have a good time because she really
Mm-hmm.
wants to go. So
Yeah.
yes, people might be disappointed. And one thing I'll say as well is like, I really struggled with the guilt of it initially. So I had
Mm-hmm.
this reframe. It made sense to me. I was like, cool, I'm going to practice. And then I did it and then I felt guilty. But slowly, it's like a muscle, right? You can't walk into the gym and hit a personal best on your first day. You have to slowly train and work. It's the same thing with saying no and setting boundaries. So yeah, lean into your JOMO and just trust that like over time, once you're more comfortable with where you're at, and like you said, if you have people in your circle and you all start to encourage each other to actually like lean into this, you do build that level of respect and becomes easier because people just acknowledge like if you're not going to be there, it's because you're putting yourself first. And that's great
Absolutely.
support to be around.
Yeah. A mature friendship means that your friends aren't going to be so insecure or upset at you for giving you what you need. A mature and supportive
100%.
friendship, the people you want to surround yourself by, are going to be the people who respect and appreciate that you need your space. And then it's a rain check for next week or whatever. And I think,
Exactly.
too, it's important to note that when you do say yes or no to something, there's always going to be that feeling I think we're all going to feel, whether it be a little bit or an overwhelming feeling of like, oh, but what if I did say yes? Or, oh, what if I did stay home and do this? Like the grass is always going to be greener. And there's always going to be part of us that wonders,
What
what it
if?
would have been like. Yeah, what if? Like, what if the other side of the coin or whatever? And that's okay. And I think, again, the more we lean into practice, just like learning what we need, learning to satisfy and fulfill our own needs and values, that I think that feeling will diminish of, always like looking to the other side and wondering, because we start to get to know ourselves better and what we truly need and what's in alignment with our values rather than just looking at what other people are doing.
Yeah, 100%.
So I would love to hear a little bit more about what you've learned and how you've grown in balancing this amazing, successful podcast that you've started on top of your corporate job as a lawyer. That seems like a lot of work, and I'm sure you've learned a lot from the experience.
Yeah, I think it really pushed me to be very critical of how I was spending my time. For example, very, very simple example, I don't really go out for big nights. I'm like you, like if someone's booking a dinner at 9 p.m., immediately count me out. Like
Oh,
I'm not coming. Like
happy hour or nothing.
yeah, it's like a 6, 7 p.m. outing, and I'd like to be at home at 9, 9:30 because the trade off, right? You start looking at your time as where is it best placed. And so for me, if I'm getting into bed past my normal bedtime and then sleeping in or feeling like hungover or anything like that the next day, I don't either get my downtime or the time I need to invest in these projects. So
Mm,
it is a lot. Like, the podcast is a lot of work. You have to be consistent with it if you want it to grow. And a full-time job is also the majority of your week. And so it really just put me in a position where I had to say no to things because there was no way I would be able to keep doing the podcast for now 4.5 years consistently once a week, every single week without missing a beat if I was saying yes to everyone else. So it
Right.
really actually, and probably now on reflection, thinking about it, was a catalyst for me to start being very protective. And it became the thing I said yes to over and above other things. But of course, it was like a bit of a transition. But yeah, the biggest learning for me was learning the value of my time in terms of, where I want to be long term. And you have to think with a bit more of a long term mindset than short term. So yeah, of course, short term, I'd much rather go out and switch off the whole weekend. But with the pipeline of work I've got coming up, or the type of season it is, like, I have to be on. And actually, one thing I've learned that we were talking about before relates to boundaries. And this will help people that maybe feel like saying no is like they just feel uncomfortable doing it, is thinking about it as a season of no. So maybe you're trying to start a business or start a podcast, or just prepare content for the rest of the year. Whilst you're in that time frame, it's a season of no. When you're out of that time frame, you can say yes to whatever you want and go with the flow. But when you're in that time frame, like, be really protective of your time. And it's always an ebb and flow, right? Like, you can't be on 24/7. You just burn out and you need that time to rest and recharge. So it kind of pushed me to be better with my boundaries and to really see the value of my time and see the seasons where I need to be on and be really protective over that.
I couldn't agree more. The second you said that, I was like, okay, this past spring, that was my season of no. And in the season of no, I, of course, still saw friends here and there, but I was very selective, as you said, as to who I was seeing. I was only seeing the friends I really valued. I wasn't seeing the surface level friends that I was just seeing to fill time. And I was very, very, selective of how I spent my 2 weekend days outside of my corporate job, because most of that did have to go towards the podcast. And that was the season of growth that I needed during that time. And now, for example, I'm more in a season of like, okay, I do have a lot more balance in life because I'm in a groove now with the podcast. So it's like I can start to say yes to a little bit more. So I love that concept that there's seasons. So in learning and growing so much through these experiences, what have you learned has provided you with more happiness and fulfillment in life versus what hasn't?
That's a great question.
It's a hard one, I know.
I think I used to really aspire for things just because I saw other people having them, or because I was socially thought that that's what I wanted. For example, like more material things. Whereas now, like, as I've gone on and as I've been able to have enriching conversations, which really fulfill me a lot, quality time with people really fulfills me a lot. Before, I used to want to have thousands of acquaintances and know everyone and do everything all the time. Whereas I think what means the most for me now is actually the quality, not the quantity. And that applies in so many different aspects. But I think that's just like the simplest way of how I've worked out what matters to me and what doesn't. And I actually think that kind of the COVID lockdown period in Australia was quite long. So I think total in Sydney, we were like 1 year total in lockdown. And that was a really forced way for me to look at what matters and what doesn't. And it really like removed all the distractions and forced me to consider where I want my time. And another catalyst for that was me moving overseas. So I moved from Australia to Dubai, and that was like starting life from zero. I didn't have my friends here. I didn't have my local gym and my networks and the coffee shops I liked going to. Our house was completely different. We didn't have family here. So when you kind of go through that like stripping process, you really have to sit with yourself and say, okay, well, what matters and what's important to me? So I think I've gone from chasing maybe like a quantity style mindset of having a lot of things and doing a lot of things to being more about like preservation and quality.
I love that. And I couldn't agree more. And I think often it takes us actually going after those material or quantity things, as you said, whether it be, more money, any surface level thing, right? Or even like, okay, in our instance, number of subscribers or followers for the podcast, whatever it is, I think then you get there and then you're like, oh, that actually didn't make me as happy or fulfilled as I thought it would. And then it causes you to ask, okay, actually, what does light me up and make me fulfilled and happy, And it's a reminder I'm constantly trying to come back to, that those aren't the answers to fulfillment and happiness, but with all the messages our society is feeding us and all these advertisements and telling us we constantly need more and more and more, it's sometimes hard to remind ourselves that happiness and fulfillment isn't in the quantity and the material and surface level things. One question I want to end on is, why is it so important to listen to your gut, and how do you recommend that we do this?
I think perhaps for everyone it's slightly different what this feels like. So I can only share, I guess, what it looks and feels like to me. And for me, a gut feeling is a feeling. It's kind of like a really strong inner knowing. So when you're doing something, it's like you get this rush of emotion. It's like anti that thing that you're trying to do. It's like a decision you're trying to make, something you want to say yes to, something you're thinking of getting involved in, or an opportunity, and it just feels wrong. That's just the best way I can describe it. I think this really comes down to your ability to trust yourself. Because especially for people who are people pleasers, you're often looking at other people for validation, right? You want their assurance that the decision you're making is the right one. But at the end of the day, you're best placed to make decisions on your own life. You know, we grow up leaning into teachers and parents and our peers. There comes a time where you need to trust your own gut. And it's fine if you make mistakes, because that's how you learn. And so I think leaning into your intuition, I think we all feel it. I think most of us feel it. But then trusting yourself enough to back it and actually let that guide you is a different story. And so I think it really does center around that respect you have for your own ability to be the best person to make those decisions. And also maybe comes down to how much validation you seek from other people. Like, on that note, I think it's a very natural thing for a lot of us to desire and look for. But the validation and even what you were saying, like the true fulfillment, it's always from within. You can get everyone in the room to notice you and to tell you that you're the best. But until you believe it, it's not going to feel true for you anyway. So I think it's really about trusting yourself.
I love that. Absolutely. And I think too, a lot of people hold off from like leaning into that voice and actually taking action on it because it doesn't feel like the quote right time. But I think it's important to remember that there's no perfect or right time. You know, like the best
Yeah.
time is now. And if it's a big pursuit that your gut and intuition is guiding you towards, or ending a relationship or whatever it is, the sooner the better, right? Start now on overcoming that period of transition as you start this thing. And I think that just holds a lot of people back from listening to the gut feeling, because there's a lot of fear surrounding it. There's a lot of, oh, but this could happen and this could happen, or it's not the right time because XYZ. But I think if you ignore that voice now, it's just going to come up stronger in a different way and continue to resurface. Erika, thank you so much for coming on today. Where can everyone find you and your amazing podcast?
Thank you so much for hosting me. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, all the streaming platforms, Instagram, TikTok, everywhere. We are the Balance Theory podcast. So if you search that wherever you like to hang out online, you'll find us.
Perfect. And you can all find that linked in the show notes as well, everyone. Thanks for listening today. And thanks again, Erika.
Thank you.